Hey guys, Tyler from Iconic Games here. I just wanted to do a quick rundown and a tutorial on this functionality that I created for rendering key images specific to a player's device type. Simply because I think it'll be useful for some people. I know I had a pain figuring this out. So um, the way this works, and I'll showcase this real quick. So I'm using a controller right now. If I go over this, you'll see it's a controller key. If I move on my keyboard, you'll see it'll change to a keyboard key. So it changes relative to whatever that player's active device type is. And so the way this works is, this is kind of the main portion of it. I have this function on this function library that just takes in a player controller and then it takes in an action. And then from that player controller, it queries the keys mapped to that action, which just returns all of the potential inputs all of the potential keys for an input. And then I'm looping through those, and I'm comparing. Since our game only has gamepad or keyboard, I'm not really comparing against anything else, but you guys may need to if you have more than a gamepad and keyboard, but I imagine most people don't. So I'm just comparing, is this a gamepad key? And then I have this custom enum called device type. The actual enum is called input devices, but it's just an enum that has mouse and keyboard and gamepad. And so I'm grabbing that from the player controller, seeing if it's a gamepad. And then if these two things equal the same thing, I return that key, because that means that key is the correct key relative to that player's device type. And so a question you might have is, how do we control this device type? Like if I'm a player and I'm using a keyboard and I switch from keyboard to controller, how do we control that? So that is simply done through an AnyKey event, and you can get this just by typing AnyKey and it'll come up. And so in this, I'm grabbing that key and I'm checking if it's a gamepad key right off the bat. And then if it is a gamepad key, then we go here, and then I have this switch, which switches on that same enum. And then if the device type is a mouse and keyboard, then I change it to gamepad and then call this event dispatcher down here. And for if it's a gamepad, I do nothing, right? And same thing for if it's not a gamepad key. If it's not a gamepad key, that means it's a keyboard key, and I switch. And then if the current device type is a gamepad, then I set this and call that event dispatcher. Because obviously we don't want this event dispatching if the device type is already set to the relative key that's pressed. Okay, so once this is dispatched, if I go into this tooltip, so this is the actual thing that's rendered in game. If I go into this, I have this initialize tooltip function, which just does some intro things, checking if the player controller variable is valid. If it is, I unbind all the events to it, and then reset that on initialization, and then I bind to this input device changed event, which is this one that we're calling from the player controller. And so the event that I'm binding is on input device change, and then here I'm just running this function from this function library. I'm feeding it the owning player controller, and I'm feeding it an action. In this case, I'm feeding it interact. And then I'm grabbing the key's display name. It's the long display name, and then I'm setting a variable equal to that. And so this is a broadcast variable, so when this gets set, it resets this. And so this is running another function from this function library called getInputImage, and all this is a simple switch. It's pulling in that input key name, converting it to a string, and then switching on these custom names. You do have to fill these out manually, unfortunately. But it's not too bad. And then all these return nodes, just I have an image selected in here that I've created for each key. Yep, that's pretty much the entire functionality though. Super simple. Took me a minute to figure out because there's not a lot of good documentation on how to properly do this sort of thing. Took me a minute to find this query keys mapped to action function. But yeah, hopefully it saves some of you guys time and is useful. So if you guys have any questions, be sure to just leave them in the comments. I will do my best to help and respond to any questions you guys have. So thanks for watching.